The pleasures of the table are common to all ages and ranks, to all countries and times. They not only harmonize with all the other pleasures, but remain to console us for their loss. Briat Sovereign. Often enough, staying in a hotel in a foreign town, I have wished to sally forth and to dine or breakfast at the typical restaurant of the place, should there be one. Almost invariably, I have found great difficulty in obtaining any information regarding any such restaurant. The proprietor of the caravanserai at which one is staying may admit vaguely that there are eating houses in the town, but asks why one should be anxious to seek for second-class establishments when the best restaurant in the country is to be found under his roof. The hall porter has even less scruples and stigmatizes every feeding place outside the hotel as a den of thieves, where the stranger foolishly venturing is certain to be poisoned and then robbed. This book is an attempt to help the man who finds himself in such a position. His guidebook may possibly give him the names of the restaurants, but it does no more. My co-author and myself attempt to give him some details, what his surroundings will be, what dishes are the specialties of the house, what wine a wise man will order, and what bill he is likely to be asked to pay. Our ambition was to deal fully with the capitals of all the countries of Europe, the great seaports, the pleasure resorts, and the show places. The most acute critic will not be more fully aware how far we have fallen short of our ideal than we are, and no critic can have any idea of the difficulty of making such a book as we hope this will someday be when complete. At all events, we have always gone to the best authorities where we had not the knowledge ourselves. Our publisher, Mr. Grant Richards, quite entered into the idea that no advertisements of any kind from hotels or restaurants should be allowed within the covers of the book. And though we have asked for information from all classes of gourmets, from ambassadors to the simple globetrotter, we have not listened to any man interested directly or indirectly in any hotel or restaurant. Hotels as places to live in we have not considered critically, and have only mentioned them when the restaurants attached to them are the dining places patronized by the bon vivants of the town. Over England we have not thrown our net for dinners and diners. Leaves me nothing new to write of London restaurants. In conclusion, I beg on behalf of my co-author and myself to return thanks to all the good fellows who have given us information, and I would earnestly beg any traveling gourmet who finds any change in the restaurants we have mentioned, or who comes on treasure trove in the shape of some delightful dining place we know nothing of, to take pen and ink and write word of it to me, his humble servant, to the care of Mr. Grant Richards, Leicester Square. So shall he benefit in future editions all his own kind. We hear much of the kindness of the poor to the poor. This is an opportunity, if not for the rich to be kind to the rich, at least for those who deserve to be rich to benefit their fellows. N. Newham Davis. Paris is the culinary center of the world. All the great missionaries of good cookery have gone forth from it. and its cuisine was, is, and ever will be the supreme expression of one of the greatest arts of the world. Most of the good cooks come from the south of France. Most of the good food comes from the north. They meet at Paris. And thus the Paris cuisine, which is that of the nation and that of the civilized world, is created. When the channel has been crossed, you are in the country of good soups, of good fowl, of good vegetables, of good sweets, of good wine. The hors d'oeuvre are a Russian innovation. But since the days when Henry IV vowed that every peasant should have a fowl in his pot, soup from the simplest bouillon to the most lordly consommé and splendid bisques has been better made in France than anywhere else in the world. Every great cook of France has invented some particularly delicate variety of the boiled fillet of sole, and Duglair achieved a place amongst the immortals by his manipulation of the brill. The soles of the north are as good as any that ever came out of British waters, and Paris, sending tentacles west to the waters where the sardines swim, and south to the home of the lamprey, and tapping 1,000 streams for trout and the tiny gudgeon and crayfish, can show as noble a list of fishes as any city in the world. The chef de cuisine, who could not enumerate 150 entrees, all distinctively French, would be no proficient in his noble profession. No. The British beef stands against all the world as the meat noblest for the spit, though the French ox, which has worked its time in the fields, gives the best material for the soup pot. And though the Welsh lamb and the English sheep are the perfection of mutton young and mutton old, the lamb nurtured on milk till the hour of its death, and the sheep reared on the salt marshes of the north, make splendid contribution to the Paris kitchens. Veal is practically an unknown meat in London, and the calf, which has been fed on milk and yolk of egg, and which has flesh as soft as a kiss and as white as snow, is only to be found in the Parisian restaurants. Most of the good restaurants in London import all their winged creatures, except game, from France, and the Surrey fowl and the Aylesbury duck, and the representatives of Great Britain make no great show against the champions of Gaul, though the Norfolk turkey holds his own. A vegetable dish served by itself and not flung into the gravy of a joint forms part of every French dinner, large or small, and in the battle of the kitchen gardens the foreigners beat us nearly all along the line, though I think that English asparagus is better than the white monsters of Argenteuil. A truffled partridge, or the homely perdrix au choux, or the splendid faisan à la financière, show that there are many more ways of treating a game bird than plain roasting him, and the peasants of the south of France had crushed the bones of their ducks for a century before we in London ever heard of canard à la presse. The Parisian eats a score of little birds we are too proud to mention in our cookery books, and he knows the difference between a mauvillette and an alouette, perhaps the greatest abasement of the Briton, whose ancestors called the French froggies. Froggies. In scone comes when his first morning in Paris he orders for breakfast with joyful expectation a dish of the thighs of the little frogs from the vineyards. An Austrian pastry cook has a lighter hand than a French one, but the Parisian open tart. Open tart! Open tarts! And cakes, and the friandises and the eyes, or coupe Jacques, at the end of the Gaelic repast are excellent. Paris is strewn with the wrecks of restaurants, and many of the establishments with great names of our grandfathers and fathers' days are now only taverns or cheap table d'hôte restaurants. The Grand Vefour in the Palais Royal, where the patrons of the establishment in Louis Philippe's time used to eat off royal crockery brought from the surplus stock of the palaces by M. Hamel, cook to the king. By Monsieur Hamel, cook to the king, and proprietor of the restaurant, has lost its vogue in the world of fashion. The present Café de Paris has an excellent cook and is the supper restaurant where the most shimmering light of the demi-monde may be seen. But the old Café de Paris at the corner of the Rue Taillebout, the house which Monsieur Martin Gapet brought to such fame, and where the veau à la casserole drew the warmest praise from our grandfathers, has vanished. Bignon's, which was a name known throughout the world, has fallen from its high estate. The Café Riche, though it retains a good restaurant, is not the old famous dining place any longer. And the Marivaux, where Joseph flourished, has been transformed into a brassiere. The Café Hardy, at one time a very celebrated restaurant, made place for the Maison d'Or, and the gilded glory of the latter has now passed in its turn. The Café Véron, Philippe's of the Rue Montorgueil, and the Rocher de Cancale in the Rue Mandar, where Borel, one of the cooks of Napoleon I, made gastronomic history. Bovier's, the proprietor of which was a friend of all the field marshals of Europe and made and lost half a dozen fortunes. The Trois Frères Provençaux, the Café Very, and Dortesios. But memories. The saddest disappearance of all, because the latest is the Maison d'Or, which is to be converted, so it is said, into a brassiere. The retirement of Casimir, one of the Verdier family, who was to the Or what Dugler was to the Anglais, precipitated the catastrophe, and in the autumn of 1902 the house gave its farewell luncheon and closed with all the honors of war. Alas for the carp à la gelée, and the sole au vin rouge, and the poulade Maison d'Or. I shall never, I fear, eat their like again. There was much history attached to the little golden house, more perhaps than to any other restaurant in the world. From its doors, Rigol Bosch, in the costume of Mother Eve, started for her run across the road to the Anglais. At the table by one of the windows looking out to the boulevard, Nestor Roqueplan, Fould, Salamanca, and Delahunt used always to dine. Upstairs in Le Grand 6, which was to the Maison d'Or what Le Grand 16 is to the Anglais, Salamanca, who drew a vast revenue from a Spanish banking house, used to give extraordinary suppers at which the lights of the demi-monde of that day, Cora, Pearl, Anna, des Lions, de Veria, and others used to be present. The amusement of the Spaniard used to be to spill the wax from a candle over the dresses. And then to pay royally for the damage. One evening he asked one of the mademoiselles, Verdier, whether a very big bill would be presented to him if he burned the whole house down. And on being told that it was only a matter of 2 or 3 million francs, he would have set light to the curtains if Monsieur Verdier had not interfered to prevent him. The Beau Demi-Dauphine, the dwelling Baron Espeleta, Princess Galitzin, and Murat, Tolstoy, and the Duc de Rivoli gave their parties in the Grand Six, and down the narrow, steep flight of steps which led into the side street, the Duke of Hamilton fell and broke his neck. The Maison d'Or was the meeting place in the 60-odd years of its existence of many celebrities of literature: Dumas, Mayak, Emmanuel Arène used to dine there before they went across the road for a game of cards at the Cercle de Monde, and later Uncle Saucy was one of the habitués of the house. 2 restaurants in particular seem to me to head the list of the classic quiet establishments, proud of having a long history, satisfied with their usual clientele, and non-advertising, content to rest on their laurels. Those 2 are the Anglais and Voisins, the former on the Boulevard des Italiens and the latter in the Rue Saint-Honore. The Café Anglais, the white-faced house at the corner of the Rue Marivaux, is the senior of the 2, for it has a history of more than 100 years. It was originally a little wine merchant's shop with its door leading into the Rue Marivaux, and was owned by a Monsieur Chevreul. The ownerships of Mademoiselle Chelette and de Lhomme marked successive steps in its upward career, and when the restaurant came into the market in 79 or 80, it was bought by a syndicate of bankers, and other rich businessmen, who parted with it to its present proprietor, the Comte de Gramont Caderousse, and his companions in what used to be known as the Lodge Infernale at the old opera, were the best-known patrons of the Anglais, and until the opera house, replaced by the present building, was burnt down, the Anglais was a great supping place. The little rabbit hutches of the entresol being the scene of some of the wildest and most interesting parties given by the great men of the Second Empire. The history of the Anglais has never been written because, as the proprietor will tell you, it never could be written without telling tales about great men which should not be put into print. Oh, oh, the history of the Anglais has never been written because, as the proprietor will tell you, it never could be written without telling tales. Tales, tales, tales about great men, great men, which should not be put into print. But if you ask to see the book of menus, chiefly of dinners given in the Grand Seas, the room on the first floor, the curve of the windows of which look up the long line of the boulevards, and if you are shown the treasure, you will find in it records of dinners given by King Edward when he was Prince of Wales, by the Duc de Morny, and by d'Orsay, by all the Grand Dukes who ever came out of Russia, by Citron and Leroy Milan, by the lights of the French Jockey Club, and many other celebrities. There is one especially interesting menu of a dinner at which Bismarck was a guest before the terrible year, of course. While I am gossiping as to the curiosities of the Anglais, I must not forget a little collection of glass and silver in a cabinet in the passage of the entresol. Every piece has a history, and most of them have had royal owners. The great sight of the restaurant, however, is its cellars. Electric light is used to light them. Luminous grapes hang from the arches, and an orange tree at the end of a vista glows with transparent fruit. In these cellars, beside the wine on the wine list of the restaurant, are to be found some bottles of all the great vintage years of claret, an object lesson in Bordeaux, and there are little stores of brandies of wondrous age, most of which were already in the cellars when the Battle of Waterloo was fought. From a gourmet's point of view, the great interest in the restaurant will lie if he wishes to give a large dinner in the Grand Seas or one of the other private rooms. If he is going to dine alone, or is going to take his wife out to dinner in the triangular room on the ground floor with its curtains of lace, its white walls, its mirrors, and its little gilt tripod in the center of the floor. Duglair was a chef who, above all others, made history at the Anglais, and the present proprietor, Monsieur Bourdelle, was one of his pupils, and therefore the cookery of Duglair is the cookery still of the Anglais. Potage Germany is claimed by the Café Anglais as a dish invented by the house, but the Maison d'Or across the way also laid claim to it, and told an anecdote of its creation, how it was invented by Casimir for the Marquis de Saint George. The various fish à la Duglair there can be no question concerning the Barbu Duglair being the most celebrated, and the Pollard Albufera, and the Filet de Sol Mornay, which was also claimed by the Grand Vefour, are both specialties of the house. You can order as expensive a dinner as you will for a great feast at the Anglais, and you can eat rich dishes if you desire, but there is no reason that you should not dine very well, and as cheaply as you can expect to get good material, good cooking, and good attendance anywhere in the world. The dishes of the day are always excellent, and I have dined off a plate of soup and a pint of Bordeaux and some slices of a gigot de set One of the greatest achievements of cookery for a very few francs. I always find that I can dine amply and on food that even a German doctor could not object to for less than a louis. For instance, a dinner at the Anglais of half a dozen Ostend oysters, potage laitue, et quenelles, melon, frites, cuisse de poulard, rot, salade romaine, cheese, half a bottle of Graves, Ecru, and a bottle of Saint Galmier cost 18 francs. Voisin's in the Rue Saint-Honore, the corner house whose windows curtained with lace promised dignified quiet, is a restaurant which has a history and has had great names amongst its habitués. Many of these have been diplomats, and Voisin's knows that ambassadors do not care to have their doings when free from the cares of office, gossiped about. When I first saw Voisin's, it looked as unlike the house of today as can be imagined. I was in Paris immediately after the days of the Commune and followed with an old general the line the troops had taken in the fight for the city. In the Rue Saint-Honore were some of the fiercest combats, for the regulars fought their way from house to house down this street to turn the positions the communists took up in the Champs-Élysées and the gardens of the Tuileries. The British embassy had become a hospital, and all the houses which had not been burned looked as though they had stood a bombardment. There were bullet splashes on all the walls, and I remember that Voisin's looked even more battered and hopeless than did most of its neighbors. The diplomats have always had an affection for Voisin's, perhaps because of its nearness to the street of the embassies. And in the 80s, the attachés of the British embassy used to breakfast there every day. Nowadays, the clientele seems to me to be a mixture of the best type of the English and Americans passing through Paris, and the more elderly among the statesmen, who were no doubt the dashing young blades of 25 years ago. The two comfortable ladies who sit near the door at the desk and the little show table of the finest fruit seem to me never to have changed, and there is still the same quiet-footed, unhurrying service which impressed me when first I made the acquaintance of the restaurant. It is one of the dining places where one feels that to dine well and unhurriedly is the first great business of life. The first great business of life. And that everything else must wait at the dinner hour. The proprietor, grey-headed and distinguished-looking, goes from table to table saying a word or two to the habitués. And there is a sense of peace in the place. A reflection of the sunshine and calm of Provence. Whence the founder of the restaurant came. The great glory of Voisin's is its cellar of red wines, Burgundies and Bordeaux. The Bordeaux are arranged in the proper precedence, the wines from the great vineyards first, and the rest in their correct order down to mere bourgeois tipple. Against each brand is the price of the vintage of all the years within a drinkable period, and the man who knew the wine list of Voisin's thoroughly would be the greatest authority in the world on claret. Mr. Roland Strong, in his book on Paris, tells how one Christmas Eve he took an Englishman to dine at Voisin's, and how that Englishman demanded plum pudding. The maître d'hôtel was equal to the occasion. He was polite but firm, and his assertion was that the house of Voisin does not serve, has never served, and will never serve plum pudding. Never! Plum pudding! Settled the matter! If the Anglais and Voisins may be said to have much of their interest in their past, Pariahs should be taken as a restaurant which is the type and parent of the present up-to-date restaurant. The white restaurant of the Boulevard des Italiens has kept at the top of the tree for many years and has sent out more culinary missionaries to improve the taste of dining man than any other establishment in Paris. Joseph, who brought the Marivaux to such a high pitch of fame before he emigrated to London, came from Pariahs, and so did Frederic of the Tour d'Argent, of whom I shall have something to say later on. Henri of the Gaillon Nota, Charles of Foyot's, all were trained at Pariahs. The restaurant has its history and its long list of great patrons. Le Désir de Roi, which generally appears in the menu of any important dinner at Pariahs, and which has foie gras as its principal component, has been eaten by a score of kings. A score of kings at one time or another. Our own gracious majesty heading the list. The restaurant at first was contained in one small room. Then the shop of Isabel, the Jockey Club flower girl, which was next door, was acquired, and lastly, another little shop was taken in. The entrance changed from the front to its present position on the side. The accountant's desk put out of sight, and the little musician's gallery built for Pariahs has moved with the time and now has a band of ziganes. Much of the grief of men like myself who prefer conversation to music as the accompaniment of a meal. The restaurant, as it is with its white walls and barry leaves or cupids and flowers, its green travertine panel let into the white pilasters, its chandeliers of cut glass, is very handsome. Monsieur Pariahs, hair parted in the middle and with a small moustache. Irreproachably attired, wearing a grey frock coat by day and a smoking and black tie in the evening, is generally to be seen superintending all arrangements, and there in the maître d'hôtel who speaks excellent English, and a head waiter with whiskers, who deserted to Henri, but subsequently returned, who is also an accomplished linguist.